Hey there! Before we dive into today's episode, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us spread the word and connect with more amazing people like you.
Welcome to webe Pärents, where parent doctors Matthew Lederman and Alona Pulde explore current parenting topics, share stories, and help bring families closer together.
Welcome to webe Pärents, where we are parent doctors exploring current parenting topics, sharing stories, and helping to bring families closer together. Hi, I'm Dr. Alona Pulde.
And I'm Dr. Matthew Lederman.
And we're so excited to have you here today. So the overarching theme of today's conversation is your beautiful flower. What does it mean, your beautiful flower? It's holding on to your internal values, to how you see yourself, regardless of the external situation that you're facing.
But before we dive into today's episode, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're helping us spread the word and connect with more amazing people like you. Plus, you'll never miss out on any of our future episodes. Thanks so much for your support.
We're going to start with some headlines and heartlines around this topic.
Headlines and heartlines.
In Headlines and Heartlines, we play with ideas, answer burning questions, tackle some current events, and find the balance between taking things seriously and keeping a sense of humor. So this is a story about a parent who shared that their child had been struggling with reading, but never mentioned feeling embarrassed about it. The child would often try to avoid reading aloud in class and became increasingly withdrawn during reading time. The parent only discovered how deeply the child was affected when the teacher mentioned that the child had been pretending to forget their book or asking to go to the bathroom during reading sessions. When the parent gently brought up the topic, the child admitted feeling dumb compared to other kids and had been hiding their embarrassment for months. The parent then took the steps to help their child by working with the teachers and finding a reading tutor.
Those are all signs that the child's worth is questioned within them and really feeling shame and wanting to hide and avoid and get out of there. That's a very painful place for a child to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For a child, for the story that the child is telling themselves that they are dumb, and the response to that is to avoid the stimulus, right? To avoid reading, which only then perpetuates the situation and the story that they're telling themselves.
And if children don't learn how to measure their inherent value in a way that we believe is healthy, they usually do it by comparing themselves to others. And that comparison is one of the easiest ways to make ourselves miserable. So we want to teach them how to experience and connect to their inherent value in ways that don't involve comparison to others.
Right. This is another story about a mother who shared that her daughter had been teased at school about the lunch that she brought from home, but she never mentioned it to the parents. The mother noticed that her daughter suddenly became uninterested in taking lunch from home and preferred buying school meals instead. It wasn't until the mother accidentally overheard her daughter talking to a friend about being made fun of for her weird lunch that she realized her daughter had been dealing with this issue silently. They had a heart-to-heart about why it's okay to be different and how to handle teasing. And what I love about this story is that the mom didn't go immediately to change it, but really to empower her daughter to see her beautiful flower in the difference, right? And how to address teasing without necessarily conforming or making changes that are not aligned maybe with the family values or even that child's personal values.
And one of the places that is like fertilizer for shame is keeping it hidden and alone.
Mm-hmm.
So when the mom was able to flush that out
Mm-hmm.
and the child felt comfortable talking about it and sharing the pain, that not only starts to extinguish shame, but also allows them to connect to their beautiful flower.
And that is a great point. I love it. Thank you. I have a couple more stories. One parent recounted how their son felt left out during team sports but never communicated his feelings. The boy was often picked last during team selections in gym class, which made him feel unwanted and embarrassed. The parents noticed a change in his enthusiasm for sports, but thought it was just a phase. It wasn't until the child's grades in gym class started slipping that they actually investigated it further. And after a gentle conversation, the child admitted to feeling embarrassed and didn't want to participate anymore. So the parents worked with the gym teacher, worked with supporting their child, worked with finding a sport that he enjoyed and could feel included in. But I think that notion of that need for acceptance is so inherent in all of us, really. We all need to belong. We all have a need for acceptance. And especially for kids, it's so painful to feel excluded or alienated.
Yeah, that was my experience in ninth grade football tryouts, where I was.
Sorry, I should not be laughing.
Yeah, so you laughed a little too hard at that one. But I was, I went from a school, a little private day school that had, I think, like 16 kids in the entire class, to a high school that had 750 kids in the class. So I was like the big fish in a little pond. Thought I was great at all sports, and then I go to this high school, try out for the football team, and I have a bigger head than most people, and there was no helmet that fit me on that fit me. And I remember going up to the gym teacher and telling him, "Hey, I don't have a helmet." And he goes, "Don't worry, you're not going to be on the team." And my pads didn't fit, and he had to help me buckle them. And this is in front of like
comedy hour with Matthew Lederman.
This is like in front of like hundreds of kids trying out. I was so embarrassed. And oh my God. But I was like, the last kid picked and like kicked off a team that supposedly didn't cut anybody.
Oh,
but it's like that I totally felt that embarrassment, and that, like, even thinking about it now, I can go back and I can laugh, which helps with the shame. And I've talked about it.
You're only laughing because you're so uncomfortable.
No, but I've done some healing work around that. But it's like, it's really tough for kids to hold that. And I remember holding that alone because I didn't know what else to do with it. But it's really painful. And then I was so happy when our daughter's gym teacher, we were getting her tested for different things. And one of the things that she had to do was kick this ball in this certain way. And the teacher was singling her out to do it. And he said, Matt, she's going to feel embarrassed because everybody's going to be like, why is she doing that? So the teacher said, what I did was I made it a game to say, who can do this? And he said, the gym teacher couldn't even do this thing. So when Kylie wasn't able to hit the ball in a certain way, because he made everybody involved and included, it didn't hit her shame at all. And she never questioned her value or her worth compared to everybody. And that, to me, is what's so amazing about teachers that can take in not just the task at hand, but also, hey, how is this going to impact these kids at such a vulnerable age where their worth is really fragile right now? It's on a tightrope, and we can either give them more stability or we can knock them right off.
Yeah. It is so much about the approach, and it's so much about not holding it alone, and it's so much about what are you teaching empowerment, or are you enabling a victimization and a victim mentality?
This episode of We Be Pärents is brought to you by We Be Calm, the child calmer designed by doctors and loved by parents.
Struggling with bedtime routines or managing your child's anxiety? We Be Calm transforms deep breathing into a fun and engaging activity, helping kids find their inner calm. Perfect for bedtime stressful moments or anytime your child needs a little extra help to stay calm. Visit webecalm.com to learn more and bring tranquility to your family. We Be Calm, because we be in this together.
That leads us to our cheers and tears.
Cheers and tears.
It's all about learning and growing together, and that story about Kylie is a great one, where that was a situation where she could have absolutely been shamed and embarrassed. The story that she could tell herself is she had no skill, no ability compared to others, versus learning a skill with her peers, and in that strengthening her own individual ability. So I love that. The story that we're going to share today is about a friend of mine and his son. And his son is 8 and loves to play Nerf gun fighting with his friends out in his yard. And he was playing with his friends, and an older boy in the community came and stole his Nerf gun and then threatened to shoot him in the head with it. And so the kid dropped his gun, and he gave up his gun, ran home, and started threatening to hurt himself because he was experiencing such immense shame. And our friend was really struggling with how to support his son in that moment. And it's so hard to see our kids in a state where they feel powerless, which is what really happened to this little 8-year-old boy. Feeling, there was this older kid, the kid took away the gun, the kid threatened to shoot him if he didn't get to keep the gun. And the boy, this little 8-year-old boy feeling powerless, ended up running home, which is even more shaming. And, then the only relief that he had was threatening to harm himself.
And the idea here that we talk to with kids a lot is around feeling small. When shame comes in and you start to feel small and shrink and shrivel up and just want to sort of hide and get away, or to that extreme of getting away is to kill yourself, you've lost connection to your value, your goodness, your worth, regardless of what happens outside. Right? So when he lost his power and he went inside and then said, I'm a failure, I am worthless, I need to escape the world here.
Yes, I have absolutely no value, no worth, to such a degree that I don't need to be here.
Right, I need to get out of here. And that's what we want to teach, how to transform that so that kids know what to do, because there's always going to be a time where somebody has more power than you. And sometimes they use that. Yeah, I would struggle with that. At the movie theater, way back when I was on a date, and I had I guess I was kicking the...
And that was not with me.
That was not... It was way back when. And it was... and I guess I was kicking the chair, but he got so upset that he turned around and basically wanted to fight me right there and threatened me and yelled at me.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was like... There was a part of me where respect came up, and then there was another part that got scared. And the part of me that got scared was feeling small and embarrassed and ashamed. Like, you shouldn't be scared. Somebody's not going to, make you feel scared. And I wanted to stand up to that. But I wrestled inside when I decided, hey, what's going to be safest? Is it safer to fight somebody? Is it safer to walk away? What's the outcome? And if somebody, did the same thing with a wallet and said, hey, held a gun or a knife and said, give me your wallet. And I had a friend who was mugged. And it's really, they take away your power. Mm-hmm. And your choice is, hey, do I give this to them? Do I concede for safety or not? And what this little boy did when he gave up his gun was the smart move, right? That was what kept him safe. Giving up your wallet if somebody has a gun, and if somebody wants to fight you and you have no idea what can happen, even if you win the quote-unquote win the fight and you knock him out and he hits his head, and you can go to jail for that. All for what? To meet a need for respect or to maintain your value and self-worth? Is there another way to keep your self-worth?
I think that's a really important point, and it really talks to an episode that we did on dependence versus independence, which is connecting to your choice. And I think
what say the quote again?
You can. Matt's new favorite quote around choice.
It's a Viktor Frankl quote. It says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
And that's really poignant even here today, because I think you're absolutely right. If he had paused to connect to his choice there, and his choice of safety was the more imminent and urgent thing to take care of at the moment. And he came from choice to go home to maintain his safety, there would have been a different sense. But instead, it was a reactive, I need to get away because I'm embarrassed, because I'm ashamed, because I'm powerless here, right? So he didn't come from choice. And so what came up for him was a need for dignity, a need for respect. All of those needs weren't met as he ran away from the situation, right? Not connecting to the fact that actually that was probably the thing to do to keep yourself safe. And in that moment, safety probably trumps dignity or respect.
And one of the things is to help people remember that even if he was bigger than you, what if you came back with a bat? Okay, but then he comes back with a bigger bat, and then you come back with a knife, and then he comes back with a gun, and then you come back with three
Right.
people with a gun. So there's always a way to increase your power. And if power is only measured based on sort of the external, right? Again, comparing yourself to how other people are, versus thinking about power, real power is your ability to choose to respond and not just react.
Right.
To me, the power in that boy is that he said, hey, you know what? I'm going to be safe, and I'm going to figure out how to meet my needs for dignity and worth and self-respect differently than just overcoming and beating up somebody that tries to use power over me.
Right. Maybe I'm not going to run home in shame. I'm going to walk home with my head held high, and I'm going to connect to my dad, who I know is going to help me figure this situation out. And my dad is bigger than this kid. There's a safety in that, right?
Or the power to connect to the shame. Hey,
Right.
there's a belief that if anybody uses power over me, that I am weak, that I am small. And okay, well, let's deal with that belief system then.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think as far as like an adult, if we were in a bar or there was somebody on the street with a knife and you and I were together, would you find it safe, increase safety if I overpowered them? Or would you rather walk away and say, hey, let's just, give them your wallets and walk away? What comes up for you around that?
I think the immediate thing that comes up for me is a differentiation of needs, right? There are needs that are comfortable and that are desirable and that are they're luxury needs or needs when we have space and time. Then there are survival, urgent, and emergent needs. And safety in situations like that elevates to an emergent need. And I think you need to obviously assess the situation and then from that make the decision that's going to protect your safety. I think in general, my inclination is always to avoid the physical fighting. Just like you said, you bring a knife, then you bring a gun. Like, where does it end here? This guy brings a friend, brings two friends, brings three. Suddenly,
right? Because if you're smaller than this other person, but you carry a gun, you could hold a gun, and then now they don't steal your wallet, but then their self-worth, they're embarrassed, their respect comes up, and then they come back with three guns.
Right.
So to me, that's the challenge that a lot of people, especially men, I believe, would struggle with. And sometimes if you don't make a decision before the heat of the moment, you might make a bad decision. And I think to realize that when you're struggling there, that safety always trumps, and avoiding a fight and taking the higher road is always preferable when possible. And then not connecting your self-worth and self-respect and acceptance of other people based on, something you see in the movies or some fantasy in your head.
And I love that because there's an internal connection to power, not an external connection to power, which is you're internally validating yourself by staying in choice, by responding, not reacting. And a lot of the desire to fight, the desire to is a reactive response. So in that, it leads really nicely into our topic and tool today, where we dive into our key parenting issue, examine its significance and the challenges that it presents, with the idea of equipping you with a practical tool that will help you address this in your everyday life. So let's get started. So today's tool came out of the concept around seeing your value, because you have worth in and of itself, inherent, innate worth, because of who you are, not what you do or what role you play or what status you have, just because you are you.
Yeah, if your value is inherent and internal, then it isn't determined by external validation, acceptance, approval. Your goodness, your worth, your value is there. It's regardless of what happens outside. That's really hard because most of us, especially as children, we use comparison. And with social media, it's easier than ever to compare. Now you can see how other people are living and saying, well, I have less than them, so I must be doing worse. Or I have my value is less.
I am less than them because I have less than them.
And we want to shift that. And you can't do that unless you set the intention to catch whenever you're aware that you're comparing. And your value, for me, this is an ongoing healing opportunity for me, because my value was based on what I did, right? So people would say, tell me about yourself. And I would immediately tell them what I did for a living, what my title was at my work, right, where I lived, so things like that versus, hey, Matt's someone that enjoys and values kindness and respect, and Matt loves to grow, and Matt's someone who, really values being there, reliable and trust, and these are Matt's values. It's not static around, Matt's title or net worth or what car Matt drives, right? That to me is where people can go off the rails a little bit.
I think not only off the rails, but it's how we identify ourselves. When you ask most people, who are you? They don't start with, well, I'm someone who values X, Y, and Z. They even, I know I answer that question. I'm a mother, I'm a doctor, I'm a caregiver, I'm a wife, right? What role do I play? What function do I serve in my community? Not who am I? What are my internal values?
The soul inside of you. And, we don't have to get too deep, but that your sort of your consciousness, right? That's you. And it's the same you when you were 5 years old, when you weren't a mother and you weren't a doctor, as it is now. And to me, that consciousness, that energy, that whatever's alive in you, inside that physical body, that has value, that has worth, that has no connection to what you do or don't do or what other people think of you. And that was another challenge, was my value was dependent upon whether my parents approved of me, whether my teachers approved of me, whether my boss at work approved of me. And if approval is your way of basically determining your value and your worth, then it's going to lead to a lot of pain in your life.
Yeah, and we see that regularly, actually, in our 10-year-old daughter, Jordy, who loves praise, loves praise. And she'll come home all alight because her teacher gave her kudos or shout-outs or put-outs, as they're called in her school. And there's such a danger in her acceptance and excitement around the praise. Not that there's anything wrong with giving her kudos, but the way that she takes that in is an elevation of her self-worth. And what happens there is, in the same way that she equates all of that praise to her self-worth, when she doesn't get the praise or when she gets the negative, a reprimand or an opportunity to do things differently, or, hey, Jordan, please stop talking in the middle of class, right? Then that impacts her self-worth negatively.
Right, because her self-worth is dependent upon her teacher approving of her actions.
Absolutely.
Versus what we want is to have somebody's worth just there, and then they care. There's someone that cares if their actions are aligned with their values. So
Right.
if she's not meeting her own need for respect and consideration during class, then that matters to her because she values respect and consideration.
Right.
But her worth isn't dependent upon that.
Yes. There's a big difference between giving someone kudos and the receptivity is, oh, they see me, versus they are identifying me.
Right. And then the problem with praise is telling someone they are good or they are bad, essentially.
Right.
Versus celebration would be telling the other person what they did that met your needs. So you can say, hey, you know, when you helped everybody with their homework, or when you were sitting quietly in class and I was able to teach without interruption, it felt so easy. And it really met my need for respect and consideration and just support, because there's so much to teach.
I love that distinction of giving kudos based on the impact of behavior versus praising the person as good, bad. Yeah, that's a really important. It can be subtle, but
Right, 'cause
I
if you
think it's a
believe-
profound distinction.
And people say, what's wrong with the praise? It's so good. Well, if you believe the good, then when you're going to believe the bad. So if somebody says you're so good because you were quiet during class, then you're going to also believe you're so bad because you weren't quiet during class. And that means your worth is tenuous. It's on a tightrope versus solid, grounded. And parents will say, well, you know, I try to build up my kids' value and worth by telling them how great they are and praising them. You know, and they'll say, I think they need that. You know, it's helping them build self-esteem. But think about that. If you have to build up their esteem, if their esteem is dependent upon external praise, then they don't have any self-esteem. Self-esteem has to come from within. Mm-hmm. How do we help kids connect to that?
I love that. And I know that Gabor Mate has, he shares that if you can't feel important or you don't feel loved, you do something that you think is important or that will help you feel loved. That same notion of if you can't find it internally, seek it out externally. And a lot of kids and adults find themselves in situations where they either are contributing for external validation, recognition, and acceptance, or they find themselves in a profession that builds up their status and in that sense gives them an external validation.
Yeah, I like that. And that's that ability to start cultivating this internal validation is the tool and is the beautiful flower that we keep talking about. So you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I just want to go back to as if you are, again, and you said it, and I think it's really important, is if you are dependent on external validation, if you are dependent on your profession to, and you know, a lot of doctors actually find that, right? When they retire or doctors, lawyers, professionals of any sort, when they retire and they no longer have that identity of status, they go into depression because there's no sense of internal self-worth.
Right, they lose their identity and they become this person that has no value and identity as far as they're concerned. They were a doctor, but they're not anymore.
Right.
That was also tough when we were executives at Whole Foods Market, and all these people would want to be our friend and talk to us and say, "Oh, we're friends," even though they wanted something. And then when you sort of learned who really was your friend, because when you lost that status when we left, there were certain people that wouldn't return calls, that wouldn't still want to talk, and then there were people that just were still there, wanted to help regardless. And I think that that's really enlightening to know, hey, are there people that like you or praise you because of what you can do for them or your status or how they see you? Or are there people that just enjoy you regardless of whether you have status or not in the conventional use of that term?
Right. And then beyond that is, can you enjoy yourself regardless of what these people think of you, which leads us into our tool for the day.
I actually struggled with that when I first left, because I wanted to go and get another job where I had status so I could be approved of. And then I realized that was actually a painful sort of trauma almost that I needed to heal, not continue to feed. That's
a good awareness, a very helpful awareness. So that leads us into the topic of today, which is the beautiful flower.
And I love the beautiful flower because the way we think about flowers, imagine if one flower could hit another flower or yell at another flower or do something that is not cool, right, as far as kids are concerned. The flower still is beautiful. The flower still looks beautiful no matter what it does or doesn't do. And what we want kids to take in is that there's a flower inside all of us. And that flower is beautiful no matter what the kids do. And in fact, no matter what the adults do. So if, my one daughter hits another and loses her patience, she still has that beautiful flower in there. Now, one of the things that we'll talk about is that sometimes the beautiful flower can be hard to see. There can be fog that develops around the flower. And when we are not connected to our values and our skills, that can create fog. So when I lose my patience and yell at my daughter with tone, I will start building up fog around my flower. It'll be hard to see. It doesn't mean it's not in there. And that's what's so important. The flower's there. It's always there. But sometimes I can't see it because my actions are taking me away and allowing fog to build up.
And I love that visual because there's the distinction between who I am and what my choices are, or what my impact is, right? And but I also love the accountability, that notion that there can be fog around that flower. And that's a real thing too, right? So the flower you don't see the beautiful flower at all times.
And our brain can say things that hurt our heart's feelings. That's how we talk about it. So sometimes the brain is a little critical and the heart starts to get hurt. And when the brain, even though it's trying to get you aligned, your actions to meet needs, it can say it in ways that allow fog to build up.
Right. Or we're not in integrity with our choices. We know we're not in integrity and we have fog around our beautiful flower. It's almost like we're choosing not to see the beautiful flower to stay out of integrity,
Right. So for example, if we can use one child hits the other and then the parent's like, why did you hit them? That's wrong. And then the child's head is saying, wow, you did something wrong. And then sometimes parents will really help and say, you should be ashamed of yourself. And then the child feels shame because they're thinking, yeah, this was terrible. I'm really a bad person. As that is happening, more and more fog is building up around their flower. So we can help that fog go away and dissipate by empathizing. So we can say, yeah, sometimes I'll actually empathize with my kid's brain and to help them separate and create a little space. And I'll say, brain, you're trying to really get, Jordan's behaviors to align with her values. You really value kindness and respect and care, and you want people to express their feelings without hitting or physical force. And you really want her to realize how important this is and to change her behavior going forward.
Yeah. Again, I really love that visual because what you are doing in that connection is connecting Jordan to her beautiful flower. When a child is reprimanded for being bad or told to be ashamed of themselves, the connection that you're making is to the fog.
I like that. So getting Jordan to connect to her pain because she didn't meet her own need for kindness and care.
Absolutely.
Which are values that help make up the flower.
Right, which is ultimately what parents want, whether they're coming from this space of connection or whether they're coming from, you should be ashamed of yourself. The you should be ashamed of yourself is really a, God, why can't you come out as kind and considerate? And why would you ever hit your sister? But if you're not even connected to that as the ultimate message, how is the child going to connect to that?
Yeah. And that's where the growth happens, when you can get the child to realize that hitting doesn't meet their own needs. You don't need to shame them. You don't need to punish them. You need them to connect and say, boy, I fell short there. Just like if a parent loses their temper and yells, screams, or even spanks, you didn't, and parents will have the same problem, or they'll get fog around their own flowers for doing those things.
And you get lost in the cycle of shame, which builds even more fog and disconnection from your flower.
Right.
So you continue to show up out of integrity with who you want to be because you can't even tap into what or who that is.
And when you can't see your own flower, there's so much fog, you say, okay, well, I better do something that is valuable. Maybe I'll earn a lot of money, drive a nice car, and compare myself to other people, and then say, well, I must be good. I must have value because look at me compared to other people. Or I'll put other people down, and I'll be like, oh, look how bad they are. I must be good because they're so bad, and I compare myself.
It's almost like the external validation in this visual is wind. Right? So the wind blows. There's another way to get rid of the fog, which is the wind blowing it away. And the wind is that external validation. But again, it doesn't tap you into your beautiful flower, into your internal and inherent values. So much richness in that.
And that's what we did with the kids, was we said, let's imagine, because that's the other thing, is how do we create the beautiful flower? And each of us took time, or we closed our eyes, a little mindfulness exercise. And I could even close my eyes now and I can see a big green meadow with the sun. And there's just one flower in this huge meadow. And it's got these beautiful red petals and some colors in the middle. And I can very clearly see my flower. And we would do those exercises with our kids to help with mindfulness, to really see it and smell it and touch it and feel it. So every time they could connect to that, even if there was some fog. And then we drew pictures. We all drew pictures and put them on the wall so that we could all see. I could see Mom's flower. I could see Kylie and Jordan's flowers, my flower, really connecting to that flower, because every minute by minute we can see it easier or not see it as easily.
And I think that's helpful in a variety of ways, not only in seeing your own beautiful flower, but seeing in the beautiful flower in Kylie and in Jordan. And, when I look up and I see the beautiful flower that you drew, when I look at you, even if we're disconnected and I look at that flower, I'm like, oh, Matt is a beautiful flower, even if we're angry at each other right now.
I am a beautiful flower. and I love, just again, I didn't call it out specifically, but when you can separate, because sometimes the shame is so intense that it's hard to even talk about. So what we would do with our kids is we would say, hey, it sounds like your brain might be saying something that's hurting your heart's feelings. Can I talk to your brain for a second? And I'd say, hold on, Kylie, turn your brain on for me and let me just talk to your brain. And she would actually flip a switch on her forehead and then let me start talking to her brain. I'd be like, hello, Kylie's brain, how are you? And she'd be like, I'm okay, I'm mad at Kylie. And then we'd have a dialogue and be like, oh, so
right, she'd have a voice.
I'm mad at Kylie. Yes. And I'd say, okay, and I would empathize with that voice and say, oh, you really, and then I'd say, and be able to create connection after that empathy with Kylie's heart. And I'd say, I see that you're really trying to take care of Kylie, but you're using words that are hard for Kylie's heart to take in, and it's making it hard to see her flower. Can we use some different words that might make it easier? And the brain was, okay, I'm willing to do that. And then we turned the brain off, and then she'd flip the switch back, and so what'd my brain say, Dad? And I would tell her. But yes. Those are all these ways to try and deal with shame that allow it to start to dissipate, the fog to dissipate.
I think that's great, and I think that naturally leads us into this no skills to pro skills.
No skills to pro skills.
So that was a really beautiful example of how you can connect with pro skills, which is to separate the fog and the flower by calling out the messages that the brain, the critical, the judgmental, the shaming, blaming messages that are going on versus those that are the heart, which is where your beautiful flower resides. So what might no skills look like, Matt?
So I think a lot of parents, because the shame is so painful, want to fix the problem and make the stimulus go away. So, for example, with the bully, you can go out, you can yell at him, threaten him, make him feel small, and that's trying to meet your needs, for empathy, make him feel what the pain that you're feeling or your son is feeling. But you're not teaching the kid to create that inner resilience. You're teaching him to make uncomfortable external stimuli go away. And we want to build that internal resilience. So I've been there. Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of NBC, says he's been there with his kids. He used to call it bat therapy. And he would want to go and beat up the kids that made his kids feel badly. But really what makes them feel badly is their brain's message to their heart. So if we can work with that, the other kid that was the stimulus, is really not the cause. Because if that other kid said, the big kid said to the little kid, you're stupid because you like watermelon and watermelon is gross. Would the little kid walk away and be like, oh, I can't believe I like watermelon. I'm such a failure because watermelon, I guess, is gross. Right? That's if he did that, he would start to feel bad about himself. But he more likely is going to say, well, I wonder why this other kid doesn't like watermelon. I think it's pretty good. So you can see how, but the little kid did go away and start to think, oh, I am this loser that got his gun taken away. Men are supposed to be strong, superheroes, and I couldn't do that, and I was scared, and boys aren't supposed to be scared. So the brain was saying all that stuff.
That was hurting his heart.
That was hurting his heart. So I think that's it. Or you could dismiss it, which is the other extreme. So instead of going out and making it go away, you could be like, oh, it's no big deal. Just get over it. Just let it go. Or make an excuse for it. Rationalize it. Oh, that was probably, you were just playing a game. He was probably just playing a game with you. Don't worry about it. So that's another way to make it, I would call that, the pro
keeping
skill.
Small.
Keeping, yeah. So another would be a praise to build up the self-esteem. So to say, hey, after he's feeling badly, well, look at all the good things that you do, and look at how great you are, and
look at how small you are compared to how big he was. Right? He's such a big kid. You're not that, or whatever it is to maintain your self-esteem, but it dependence on that external validation or rationalization.
Right. Or like, good for you for not getting into a fight. So you're praising him about something else, which may be a value of yours that you want to address. But you're not helping him build resilience around his shame and see his beautiful flower. You're trying to sort of distract from it with praise.
Right.
And then...
So let me just sum that up. So I'm hearing the no skills can be threatening or bullying or yelling or dismissing or even praising to build up self-esteem.
Correct. And the pro skills we talked about a little bit already. But I think being able to, again, connect to the beautiful flower, empathizing with the brain when it's saying things that are hurting the heart's feelings.